The thing is that a project rarely fails because of technology, but I have seen many projects fail due to reasons that boil down to one single aspect: people. The problem starts when projects start going off track. This is how it goes. People start playing the usual blame game. The first person to be shot is normally the project manager for not controlling the scope, or not controlling the stakeholders, or being able to control the budget. They can blame the business case, or the estimation process, or the lack of user input, or etc., etc. But the hard truth is that all of these blames are just symptoms of failure, not the underlying causes of project failure. And focusing on the symptoms does not lead to anywhere. All this unnecessary blame and running around is like trying to eradicate chickenpox by focusing on the rash it creates. Frankly, we need to ask ourselves why. Why do so many projects fail? Did you know out of every 100 IT projects, about 94 have to start over again? At least once. Based on my experience and research by some of the great industry experts, the real reason why projects fail is because they fail to gain sufficient momentum to succeed. Now, in physics, momentum equals mass times velocity. That means you get something significant moving in a specific direction at a certain speed. In project terms, take this concept of physics and interpret it as momentum equals critical mass of understanding times velocity, which means really understanding what the project is all about. Velocity is all about direction, aimed at a particular target, and getting there with some degree of speed. Now let's be clear how you get to critical mass of understanding in this formula. In layman person's terms, it would be you go get the business requirements. So momentum here is not about being killed by those people that don't know what to do with those requirements once they've got it. It's about being killed by the inability to get requirements done, or at least done well in the first place by the business analysts. Here is another mind-blowing statistic. 70% of projects that fail because of poor requirements, which is called out to be the single greatest danger to IT productivity improvement. So regardless of your development approach, whether it is waterfall, agile, iterative, or hybrid, which is all quite common today, uncovering the business needs and then communicating those business needs efficiently to IT is what's critically important. No one knows your business better than the people in it. But what's hard is converting that knowledge into clear, concise, and accurate requirements. Fundamentally, no amount of brilliance in coding can fix having poor direction on what the business needs to achieve. It's common sense to know that good requirements equal good project, and bad requirements equal bad project. But it's important to look at the reasons why companies fail so often to get good requirements, because that is what underlies the failure to get momentum and ultimately the failure behind projects generally. You know, maybe it's because everyone has their own thoughts to make sure that requirements don't go off the track. If you have that many people all trying to get the boat sailing in their own way, everybody knows what's going to happen, right? It's going to sink, of course. Or maybe it's because the senior executives want processes done a certain way. Failure is not something that is planned deliberately. But what happens is that executives or senior managers invariably have a whole lot more experience and knowledge in knowing what doesn't work in requirements gathering process than what does. So then they plan it their own way. But there comes a time when we all need to realize that no amount of pushing will make that water go up the hill. Seriously. A majority of people who have ever worked on technology projects now or previously have for sure seen poorly constructed deliverables, have gone through the frustration in trying to get a project moving really hard where the requirements are not done well, and then to top it all, have seen business objectives totally missed because the solution simply doesn't fit. You see, when it comes to the requirements gathering phase of a project, a lot of people think all we need to do is get the SMEs together. They understand the business and the problems of requirements is going to go away, and that some think that the business analyst professionals should be able to articulate the requirements themselves. I mean, certainly all of them can think and write. And this thinking is not necessarily wrong. It's just incomplete. As we mentioned even earlier, no one knows your business better than the people in it. But converting that knowledge into clear, concise, and accurate requirements is what fundamentally gets missed. I think in general, the complexity involved in collecting the right requirements from the business stakeholders, particularly when we are dealing with a large project, is a skill that is vastly underestimated within the IT industry. Okay, let's just forget the example of a large project scenario. Let's just consider a smaller project. Say it's related to a simple business function, and it only comprises of 10 business processes. Sounds simple, isn't it? But as they say, devil is in the details, because each of those processes have 5 to 10 steps, and then each of those steps has multiple variations. Each of those variations has one or more business rules, and those business rules is what administers who can do what they can do, what they can't do, and each of those, etc., 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 all the way down the lane. Do you see the mounting explosion of individual bits of functionality that needs to be talked about, even under a simple circumstance? So imagine the amount of things to be considered for a large-scale project now. Do I need to convince you any further to finally say that there are some very specific skill sets needed by those people that are required to do this job of requirements well? First things first. Can we all please agree that the ability to stand in front of the room full of senior managers and facilitate an intense and yet effective meeting is a fairly unique skill? To get exactly the right information and making people of all different types and with different personalities from different parts of the organization all agree on how business is going to work is not easy. Just think of the last time you had to decide to go with a group of friends to watch a movie. Secondly, facilitation skills, is one of the things that only great business analysts can do, that most other people can't. And most people would know that the guy or girl who is facilitating meetings as part of his bread and butter every day will have a way better understanding of how to get that job done than the person who does it probably once every few months or maybe once a year. That person who is facilitating all the time knows how to get all those different personalities moving in the same direction. Pretty amazing talent, I tell you. But now let me give you a more complicated area of expertise that's even more important and something very hard to find. It's the ability to see the forest for the trees. When a project is getting started up, there is not a lot of well-organized information available. And frankly speaking, business analysts shouldn't be expecting to deal with well-organized information. Bluntly, their job is to deal with it by getting there and figuring it out. Now you see, there are a lot of people that only get to be a part of 1 or 2 very large projects in a year, and some of them in their lifetime. So their practice and understanding in managing hundreds of disparate pieces of information and then trying to make sense of all those things to take it into a cohesive business model is limited. It's like a newly trained co-pilot versus an experienced pilot. The new co-pilot is just not as confident, and they would get overloaded in new unforeseen situations or information fairly easily. However, the experienced pilot, let's face it, knows what he's looking for. Even if there is an unforeseen situation or massive amount of information that could be coming at them as they are flying 35,000 feet high. And that only comes with being a pilot over a number of years, flying in all sorts of different situations. And they can do that even if there is an emergency. So organizing disparate data into well-organized information is a skill, just like any other. But what many people fail to realize is that the vast majority of analysts, managers, and executives on the project are not regularly exposed to the massive information overload. This is an important point because sometimes people think, oh yes, we have got talented people and they can deal with it. But to deal with it requires not just talent, but massive amounts of experience to go with it as well. So seeing that forest for all those trees is tough. And it's one of those skills that, to be honest, companies don't value highly enough. So the answer to the question, why do so many projects fail, is this. Projects fail because they consistently fail to gain momentum. And by this, it means that they are consistently failing to get critical mass of understanding to move forward. and somehow consistently underestimate the task of getting the requirements done, which involves everything from facilitating a session to getting their head very quickly through the mesh of very complex business processes, to be able to avoid seeing a piece in isolation, but rather at all given times to be able to see the big picture. And let's not forget to be able to respectively challenge the stakeholders when gathering requirements rather than just being an order taker. These are unique capabilities that only an experienced and refined senior business analyst will have, that others just don't have. So very simply speaking, an organization that doesn't do requirements well for its projects lacks momentum. They lack the ability to execute quickly, making it one major reason why so many projects fail. Think about it. And if this is what your organization has experienced in the past or is experiencing right now, then maybe renewed business momentum is not that far away for your own self. eSure Technologies will be honored to work with your organization and provide those unique capabilities in the form of matured and richly experienced business analysts and project managers that can help your projects gain momentum.